the way.
We're wanted men. I have spoken.
Welcome to episode 129 of the Smugglers Galaxy podcast, your favorite podcast for smugglers in the galaxy. This morning, we got a special guest with us, Mr. David Quinn. David, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing really well, Glenn. How are you today?
I am good. I got to get the little bit of housekeeping out the way. Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Jason's with us also. Jason,
I'm
hey.
here. Hi.
Hello, Jason.
Hi.
How's everybody's weeks?
Can't complain.
Yeah.
Yeah, good so far.
Yeah. Y'all, anything fun or exciting happen? Pick anything fun up?
I picked up a cool couple things. I got a first shot Imperial shuttle from the Titanium series from like 2006 to 8. It does say Micro Machines on the back of the packaging, so this does fit into the Micro Machines collection. I also picked up the UGG, the Chase version of the Slave One, because they painted those silver. So you can go to the store and grab a regular one, but the Chase was a silver one. So I got that, and it's a sign-off sample, though the sign-off sample's been ripped off. The tape's still there. It's got the Providence, so I'm not concerned about it being not a sign-off sample. And then the other cool thing is I've got another version of that UGG made with packaging that never went to production. So it's like pre-packaging.
Nice.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What's different about the packaging?
It's a different shape. It's a different color. Same information. But yeah, it looks different. If you side by side, they're like, oh, that's definitely different. It's just different color, different shape. I don't know why they changed it, because it looks pretty much the same other than some of the details. But it's cool. Glenn's leaving for some reason.
Well, congratulations on that pickup. That's a really nice one.
Yeah. Excited about that. And I got something else cool coming in another couple of weeks, Micro Machine related. So
very nice.
Yeah. How about you, Glenn? Did you pick anything up?
Only thing I picked up was GameStop released a Boba Fett keyboard for a computer, and I picked that up. I fought it for a few weeks and went by it. And then my wife got a Little People ET prototype. So that's about it. Not a fun time in Star Wars world. I'm kind of waiting. I just realized that Toylanta is in a month, and just kind of chilling, waiting on that.
Yeah. It's like the calm before the storm, so to speak. We've got Toylanta coming up, and there's a lot of activity happening then.
Yeah. And I know I'm tired. I know people are probably tired about us griping about Micro Galaxy Squadron, but I'm still trying to hunt those, and it's $1 late, $1 short,
Yeah, I feel it. I feel the stress. Always a bridesmaid, never a bride.
Yeah, so I think I'm just going to kind of let that happen, and because, just kind of take my time. Instead of going to every Target I see, I'll just go when I go, not make a special trip anymore.
Did you
Dave?
see...
No, go, Dave. Go. Oh, shoot, Jason. Sorry.
No, it's okay. David, did you pick anything up that you want to share?
I did. I haven't picked anything up in a while. I grabbed a 6-inch Black Series Rey prototype, a first shot from The Last Jedi, and from Rise of Skywalker. So where she's in her white outfit, except this one is purely in, I think it's in black and maybe peach legs. So it's a really different one. I have a bit of a run going for it, and I was happy to add that to my collection.
Awesome.
Yeah, Deal or No Deal has been on fire this weekend with prototypes. So this is another prototype
weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was showing my wife like the Micro Machine stuff. There was that George Sakula, which is the George Lucas figure, but it comes with an X-Wing Micro Machine. And my wife said, you need to leave that group immediately. So that's why I haven't bidded on any of that stuff this
Mhm.
weekend. But yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah.
It's tempting.
It is.
Yeah, I
also
know you've
tempting
been
to sell the car and buy it all.
I know you've been tempted on that George Lucas one just because of the micro machine collection or connection.
Yeah, and it would have been a run because it's the first shot, and then there's like a carded sample.
Oh, really?
There's 2 different versions up.
Yeah, I could tell. I can feel your wife's pain. She'd be like, "No, Jason, no."
Yeah, no, she says no. Did you see this week? I don't know, David, if you're part of the Micro Machine, Micro Galaxy world, but somebody pre-ordered on Amazon last summer a blind link on Amazon for Micro Galaxy something, and in the mail this week came Series 3. It's like it was an accident that Amazon put it up there, and then it was an accident that Amazon shipped it early.
Oh, wow.
But
Yeah.
it was Series 3. It was Obi-Wan Starfighter from Revenge of the Sith, so the smaller one. And then it's Anakin Starfighter from Revenge of the Sith. So that was cool. That was
Yeah.
like kind of shocking. Somebody hit gold
Is there a release date for them yet?
just this summer.
Okay. Wow, that's nice.
Technically Series 2 is, I mean, they're just hitting shelves, but they're not like in mass right now.
Mhm.
So I don't know what's going on with the whole distribution of those things, but we got a preview of Series 3 before it was supposed to be announced, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. And they also had the pod racer, like the Bantha Eve pack came out, which was the 2 pod racers. So it's interesting what's going on with that line right now.
Yeah. Amazon also had listings for a V-Wing, which is a clone something. The clones fly that. Maybe from Clone Wars, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Poe's black and orange X-Wing, and then Anakin's Starfighter, the yellow pointed one.
Yeah, and that black X-Wing is not supposed to be a chase, so I'm gonna have to find that one because that's an awesome looking ship.
Which could be repainted to the blue and white one.
Yeah, if they're gonna do repaints right, I don't care. Because there's a lot of repaints to be done.
I saw Alfonso, because Alfonso works at Walmart, and he's saying like people are not interested in the vehicles themselves. They're only interested in the chases and the rare ones.
Yeah.
That's the thing that excites them.
Yup.
Which stinks because that could lead to an unhealthy line.
Yeah, it does. I think it will. Because for some reason, I want to know: are people chasing that Sabine because it's Sabine's ship, or because it's a chase? Why? Why?
I think it's a mixture of both. I think it weighs more heavily on the fact that it is a chase, but I think the fact that it is Sabine and she's going to possibly show up in the new Ahsoka series makes it even more attractive.
Yeah, I think it's like I'm. My wife sent me 3 pictures. Anyway, yeah, exactly. I agree with that. I think it's the fact that it's a Sabine. It's Sabine's ship. I think it's a fact that it's a ship people have been waiting for. I think it's a fact that it's the Ahsoka series is coming up, and it's
Cool
just
looking?
it's huh.
Cool looking. It looks cool.
Yeah, it's an awesome ship. But sorry.
Are you able to like connect a cable to your computer and get?
Is it
off the
really
line?
that bad?
Well, I don't know if it's that bad or if you can't hear me or what's going on.
Okay, hold on. Let me unknown device. Let me do this. Network. I'm going to prioritize my computer.
Thank the maker.
Yes. If I can find my computer.
That was funny at at the paint night when you said something like "thank the maker," and Sydney, our painter, was like, "What'd you say?" Thank the maker, and like you didn't offer an explanation, but she didn't really pry.
Right.
She didn't know what was going on. It was kind of funny. I'm like, she thinks this is a religious moment.
Yes. I was trying, man, but nobody wanted to have fun with it.
All right, let me fly through the news. I got a bunch
Fly
of
through the
news.
news. Do the news.
You've got lots of editing on this episode to do, so sorry about that.
Yeah. Awesome.
The direct, which I don't know if is a reliable source or not. It's a website. They're reporting that a new Star Wars movie will be announced soon. The projects that are currently in the works are Damon Lindelof, Kevin Feige, Taika Waititi's got one, Ryan Johnson's got one. I'm not sure if Patty Jenkins is still, if her movie's still in play, but allegedly they've got 5 years of Star Wars movies mapped out. And if the rumors are true and Kathleen Kennedy retires after Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, that means we will have a new person running Lucasfilm. I think if it's somebody who she's been shepherding into that role, there's a good chance that there won't be a change in that course. But if you got somebody new, somebody fresh outside of Lucasfilm come in, they might new regime change, new plan. We're going to throw all that stuff out the window. We're going to do things differently. So who knows what's going to happen?
All right. Because it's not like Lucasfilm is used to going, we got all this good content. We're going to throw it away and start from scratch.
Right. Damon Lindelof is supposedly the one that's closest to production. And Yaha Abdul-Martin II, who's played Black Mantis in Aquaman. Is that the right character?
Is that the guy with the big head?
Yeah, he played
that's Black that.
He played Morpheus in the Matrix Resurrections. He played I don't want to, if you haven't seen HBO's Watchmen, go watch it. I don't want to spoil which character he plays, but it's awesome.
Okay.
And he's going to be Marvel's Wonder Man, and he's supposed to be part of this new Star Wars project, allegedly, which makes sense because Lindelof did HBO's Watchmen.
Okay, cool. I still need to watch the Watchmen.
I would expect. Is that what you just said?
What was that? I just said I need to watch the Watchmen.
I said who's watching the Watchmen?
I haven't watched it yet.
That's I want to read the comic book too.
Yeah. I tried watching the movie years ago and it was a weird time in my life and I couldn't get through it.
Read the comic book. It's
okay.
So much better than the movie. Even though the movie, it's interesting because the movie's like faithful to a fault almost.
Really?
Yeah. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. I don't know if it did. I think they missed a couple things about character development in the movie.
Gotcha.
Anyways. Star Wars is going to be released. The original trilogy is going to be released on 4K May 2nd, available in Best Buy. So if you're old like us and you want to own physical media, you don't want to turn on Disney Plus to watch it, you can do that. A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi will be available. But they didn't say if it was going to be, I assume it's going to be the regular stuff that they show on Disney Plus. I don't think it's going to be theatrical cuts, unfortunately.
Yeah, that the only reason to buy the physical copies is if it's the original release, like the unedited versions of it. That'll be the only reason to do it.
Yeah, I mean, why I stopped buying Marvel movies now that I've got Disney Plus, and I can just wait 45 days to watch the movie on Disney Plus. So why even make it?
Right. That's what I wanted to go back and talk about the movie, in theaters, because we all got spoiled over the last 3 years. When I see a movie come out on theaters, because that's where everything's going right now, it's like, man, I got to go to a theater because I can just wait. We got spoiled watching it here, watching it in your house, where you didn't have to go spend all the money, and you didn't have to buy popcorn, you didn't have to. You could pause it when you had to go to the bathroom. You know what I mean? And now that we got to go back to theaters, it's like we got to relearn all that again.
You're missing the community element, because when that Star Wars blares on screen, everyone starts clapping. You don't get that in the living room. If I start clapping at the start of the movie, I'm usually alone because no one's watching it with me, or my family will start laughing at me. What the hell are you doing down there?
Right. Dad's watching Star Wars again.
That's just what you do, people. Think about all the times that we would cheer onto something.
Yeah.
I do remember the moment in Rise of Skywalker when you hear Lando on the speaker and everyone started cheering then.
Okay.
I don't know why that moment came to mind. Chewie, I'm home. That was another good one when people clapped.
Yeah. That
Chewie,
when you saw Yoda start kicking Count Dooku's butt, that was kind of cool.
Oh, when Darth Vader appeared for the first time in no, not in the first time, in the hallway of Rogue One.
Uh-huh.
That was a moment in my theater. We were all just like, oh yeah. It was guttural. That's what you miss in the theater.
Okay, fine. I guess I'll go back to the theater.
I think you mean theater.
The movie
You're saying
theater.
theater.
Theater, eh? Oh, we can't get on another Bears tangent, dude.
A what tangent?
Bears.
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica. What are you talking about?
When we did the Bears last week, never mind. The
Oh,
Bears.
the Bears. Okay. Anyways, John Favreau received his star on the Walk of Fame this week. Yeah, received a star on the Walk of Fame this week. He was also talking to Empire, the magazine, about why they included all that Mando stuff in the Book of Boba Fett, and he felt like they didn't want to do a hard reset, that they thought they would just slide it into the Book of Boba Fett to kind of get the ball rolling. So the ball is already rolling with season 3. It just stinks that if you skipped Book of Boba Fett, you've missed that whole storyline with Mando getting Grogu. That's 1 week.
1 week. What are
One
you
more week.
expecting? What are you expecting from Mando, man? What do you want to see?
I think we're going to see Sabine and Thrawn together.
Yes. They're going to
I'm
kiss.
joking. I'm joking. I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. I think Mando's trying to get. I think the first thing he needs to do is go back to Mandalore and go to those caves and dip his head in the water or something like that. Whatever she said, to make him another Mandalorian again, because he's got to like prove himself. So I expect that to happen.
Yeah, I expect a lot. It'll be cool. And then I've also heard rumors that this will be the last season with Din Djarin, and it'll go on another tangent next season. So I guess we'll see what happens. Dave, what do you think?
No,
I can't see that happening. I think the Mandalorian needs Din Djarin and Grogu. I was honestly surprised when they separated them, because to Disney, Grogu is such a moneymaker.
Right.
And I had a feeling that maybe Disney played a part in that as well, to say, no, you have to bring Grogu back. You can't do the Mandalorian without him. But I think I like the idea of them separating, and I thought it would have actually given Din Djarin a sort of maybe a darker story with the Mandalore arc that's happening this season. But it'll be fun to see the two of them together again. I don't know. I've really been staying off of social media and following the trailers or anything like that. I've only seen one trailer so far for it, because I'd like to be surprised going into this one.
Right. Well, you're not missing much because they just keep repeating the same stuff over and over again, just in a different package.
Yeah, I saw the trailer that they released during Monday Night Football, and it was nice because it showed a lot of the characters that we already know, and it didn't give too much away about the season.
Right.
well then I don't want to speculate anymore, because I don't want to
Oh no,
provide any educated guess.
No, feel free to speculate away.
But it did look like Mandalorian was flying the gauntlet, didn't it? Bo-Katan ship.
Really? I didn't pay that close of
Oh.
attention.
It looked like there were some action shots, and then they would cut to Mandalorian in a cockpit. So maybe that's just creative editing on the trailer's part.
Mhm.
But it did insinuate
well-
to me. What?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I know that there was a point where we see some of the Mandalorians that they look like they're in kind of the hangar, and they fall out of the ship. So I was wondering if maybe he's flying that ship. He's flying Bo-Katan's ship, so that the rest of the Mandalorians can execute whatever mission they're accomplishing.
Yeah. That'd be pretty cool. Although I don't want to see other Mandalorians in action. I want to see Din Djarin. I almost said it. Din Djarin in action.
I want to see all the Mandalorians they can fit on screen in action, man. Come on.
Yeah.
Give me all of them.
Yeah. There was like that Empire cover that had holograms of all the different Mandalorian helmets.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, like 20 different helmets on screen. So that'd be cool to get like an army of Mandalorians.
Dude, I'm telling you, if Hasbro does not do a repaint of the TVC Mandalorian white box, I'm going to be upset.
Hmm.
With the band of like the four or five Mandos in it.
Yeah.
I
That'd be
will
an
buy
easy
that.
thing for them to do.
Oh, yeah. That's money. Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching.
Disney published its first quarter report, and it lists Ahsoka as season 1, which is interesting because Marvel's Secret Invasion and Lucasfilm Skeleton Crew were both listed as limited series, meaning there's only one plan. So, I mean, it could be just a mistake, but it could also mean that no, this is not a limited series, that we have a second season in the works.
I've seen
It could also
Go ahead, David.
no, it could also mean that it's starting out as a limited series, and then they'll see whether they want to take it to a second season. Whereas with something like Ahsoka, I think the character and the story tie into a bigger plan that looked for the Star Wars.
Yeah, I agree. It's possible. Any thoughts, Glenn?
No, I agree. I think that they could have just marked it as season 1 and see what happens. I've also seen other limited series that'll do a season 1. You know, when you're going through the channel, the menus on Netflix or whatever app you use, they're on. They say 1 season, and it's a limit. You know, it's a limited series.
So we'll see.
Yeah,
it is definitely a bigger. It's a small piece in a bigger picture that they're painting. So time will tell.
Yep.
And then the last piece of news, and I'm just sliding this in because I got really excited about it. My favorite Super Bowl commercial this year was Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It looked phenomenal. It had everything you would want. You had classic indie, sarcastic indie, adventurous indie, Sala. I mean, come on, man. It was awesome. Yeah, Glenn, just freeze. You froze again?
I did. I don't know what's going on with my internet today. But yes, it had everything. I was real impressed with the de-aging. That was the first one that I've seen.
Yeah.
The first trailer for Indiana Jones I've seen, and I was real impressed with that de-aging. It's like, if they can do that for Indiana Jones, why can't they do that for The Mandalorian? Or maybe because the technology has advanced already so far that, you know, now they can do it a lot better.
I would imagine they built on the tech that they made for The Mandalorian for this, and they probably invested more money because it's theatrical. You can do that. So I would imagine going forward, The Mandalorian will benefit from this.
Gotcha.
But it looked flawless. And I think that's the beginning of the movie. I think we're going to see young Indy at the start, sort of the hook. And then whatever he does is the young version will relate to what he does as the older version.
Awesome.
But I'm really excited about that.
Dude, I want to talk about The Flash real quick while we're talking about Super Bowl and trailers and stuff. After watching the Flash trailer, I can understand why you're so upset about the multiverse coming to Star Wars.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing it.
Stop it. Although it's in the comic books, it's Flashpoint, and there is, you know, different Earths in the DC universe. But it is bad timing that Marvel's opening up their multiverse at the same time that DC's doing it. And it can get messy real quick. It's fun, and the Flash looked like it was fun, but I don't need. I don't want them to redo Rise of Skywalker. Just keep going. Just you know, just keep going.
Right.
I wish I could articulate myself better than I'm doing right now, but I just
what they need to do is
it's
just
a bad choice.
Just say oops and forget about it.
Yeah.
There's a problem with the sequel trilogy, though. If people don't want it to continue, a lot of the stories that are being told now have to lead up to it, or are starting from that point and going forward. So I think it's really difficult because you have a chance to maybe take a step back and do something new with, say, the what happened with Rebels, you know, with the world between worlds. But you're right. It once it starts getting into either like a multiverse territory or stepping back and erasing some of the canon, I think that gets really hairy with collectors, with fans.
Yeah.
I just thought about something that just popped into my mind. What if Ahsoka becomes like a Doc Brown character at the end of the Ahsoka show, and she just jumps through time, like traveling, using the world between worlds or something stupid like that, and that's how they explain Ahsoka away in the sequel trilogy?
Yeah, I was just thinking, you know, Ahsoka introduced world between worlds, but he engineered that as to serve the purpose of bringing her from point A to point B.
Right.
So that was part of it, but inadvertently, anybody, any content creator can go into it now and use that for time travel, which I'm not
because
happy
it's
with,
canon.
because it's canon.
Right. Unless Dave Filoni's sitting there going, you can't use it, and won't let people use it.
I
'Cause
hope
it's his
that's
baby.
the case. I hope that's the case.
You know, it's just like Ahsoka. That's his baby. He is very protective of her, and maybe he'll be protective of the world between worlds.
Maybe. I have my arms crossed right now. I know people can't hear that on the podcast, but when I start thinking about multiverses in Star Wars, my arms cross and no,
He tenses up.
I can see the steam coming out of Jason's head. He's just like, no, I don't want it.
Stop it. You can fry an egg on my forehead right now.
I have a quick question for each of you. Is there a certain series or Star Wars related story that's coming out this year that you're most excited about?
Ahsoka.
Yeah. I mean, that's Rebels season 5 for him.
Right.
I'm really looking forward to Mandalorian. I'm very curious about Skeleton Crew because John Watts directed the Spider-Man movies. He did a really good job, in my opinion, of those movies. And to have like the Goonies or Stranger Things set in the Star Wars universe, I'm kind of curious about that.
Now, being said, yeah, I'm really looking forward to Ahsoka just because it is Rebels season 5, but Mandalorian just looks incredible because I love Mandalore. I love the lore behind Mandalore, and to find more of that out and to see it on the screen, small screen, I think that's going to be awesome.
Well, in a way, then Mandalorian season 3 is actually Rebels season 5 as well, because it has Bo-Katan and going back to Mandalore. Which was an arc that started in season 3 or 4 of Rebels.
I want to say season 4 probably. So yeah, you're right, and I'm curious if they are gonna. They've got to link Mando season 3 to Ahsoka somehow, because they already introduced Ahsoka in season 2 and the Grand Admiral Thrawn name drop. So I'm sure there's going to be one episode that we're just gonna freak out about because it's going to be a tie-in to Ahsoka.
I think you're right.
Because Dave Filoni, he's got to put that carrot down for, hey, well, this is what's going on, or this is what's coming, so be ready for it.
I think if you usually they list the script writers or the writers for each episode, and so if you see Filoni's name, that's probably going to be an Ahsoka one, or something big with Bo-Katan as well too, because I think those are 2 of his favorite characters.
All right. It's exciting, man. This year is going to be great. I was listening to your podcast, and you're just like, what if Mandalorian season 3 is a letdown? I'm like, it better not be.
I felt so bad about saying that, but at the same time, I think just because people expect it to be so good, that we were blown away by the first season. The second season had some of the most amazing characters like Bo-Katan, Ahsoka, Luke come back. But I just wanted to put that out there as I think to kind of set people's expectations, because we don't know. I don't know how you feel about Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan, but for me they were sort of a letdown. And so I was kind of a little fearful, hey, that could happen to Ahsoka, it could happen to Mandalorian, it could happen with Skeleton Crew. But I don't think so. I think hopefully they're on the right path with this.
Yeah, I think Book of Boba Fett would be a better primer for Mando season 3, because Favreau wrote a lot of Book of Boba Fett with Robert Rodriguez, but is it just a one-off, the decline of perceived quality in that show, the writing, I mean, or is it just a sign of things to come? Is he overstretched? Is he burnt out? Is there some sort of deal behind the scenes where he needs to write X amount of episodes? If that's the case, quality over quantity, maybe he needs to slow down and focus on doing just 3 or 4 scripts and hiring other people to come in to write the other ones. Who knows? But it is possible that Mando will be a letdown but then again, the Mando episodes of Book of Boba Fett were awesome.
They were.
Right. Yeah.
So who knows? Maybe it's just Mando. Maybe it's Boba Fett that we're done with.
I think the reason why Book of Boba Fett was such a letdown is we were expecting old school Boba Fett, and we got new Boba Fett who just wanted to have peace and wanted, wanted to bring peace to Tatooine versus I'm going to go kick butt. And I think we were all wanting the old school Boba Fett coming out of the Sarlacc pit and, wanted to see more action than more peace, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it, but I think there's, yes, we might have had different expectations for it, but I think if you look at it as a structure and just as the structure of the story, it felt really strange.
Mm-hmm.
I think after watching a show like Andor, you can really connect with the characters. They put the time into it. There weren't plot holes where I was just the structure of Book of Boba Fett was a mess, and I think it was because they had the idea as they were filming the end of season 2, and then just tried to kind of rush and put it together. I think Favreau maybe ran into that problem. As you said, he was overstretched. But there was a lot of potential for it, and I think they handled the character Boba Fett correctly in season 2 of Mandalorian. I just think it sort of went off the rails. But as someone who's not a Boba Fett fan, Glenn, I know you love him. I really started to appreciate him because of season 2 of The Mandalorian. So I was really excited to see this new version of Boba Fett. But yeah, I mean, hopefully this year they've maybe, I think they've had more time to create this stuff. Filoni's been working on Ahsoka probably, for the last in his mind the last 10 years. So he knows where that story is going. And then with Mandalorian, I think they took their time with this one. So it looks like it's going to be a good season.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that I heard him say that, there were shots in Ahsoka that he's been thinking about for 5 or 6 years since the end of Rebels.
It's awesome.
So it's going to be a good show. And yeah, I think you'd brought up a good point, David, with like Boba Fett and Mandalorian season 2. If we could have got that Boba Fett in the Book of Boba Fett, I think people would have been a lot happier with Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah, because there was still a mystery to him, I think, and there was a toughness and a really interesting side, and I think Tamora Morrison said in an interview that his character should have worn the helmet more and should have been more of a mystery, and I think he's absolutely right.
Yeah, I think they tried to push hey, this is Tamora Morrison playing Boba Fett too hard in that show. And they probably could have got away with a lot more action if they would have kept the helmet on and had a stunt actor in that suit like they do with Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, less of your imagination to fill in the blanks is what happened with Boba Fett. For the longest time, he was a mysterious character. People didn't like the fact that he was introduced in Attack of the Clones, but less is more. I mean, that's an editing technique that goes back all the way to, the first person I know about it was Hitchcock, who would edit things, but in a way where you wouldn't see the action. You would just kind of make it up in your head. Mm-hmm. And so Boba Fett's that kind of character where he's this cool guy, he's mysterious, he gets the job done. Who is he? And so you'd get the action figure and you'd go play with it in your backyard and make up your own story. And then they start inserting all this information. You're like, that's not the Boba Fett that I thought of. And so that kind of leads to that letdown, I think.
Right. Well, that's why Jaws was so scary, because the shark died and they couldn't shoot the shark. So they had to totally rethink the whole movie. And it turned out to be a successful movie because the animatronic shark didn't work.
There's a deleted scene in Fight Club where they compare one of the fights to what the theatrical version was. And in the original cut, it was much more violent. You see much more of the fight. In the theatrical cut, you see the people's reaction to the fight and you hear the punching. And it's much more impactful because in your mind, you're thinking the worst. Whatever that is, whatever your brain is thinking is worse than what you actually would see. So, yeah, it all goes back to the same kind of idea.
Right.
They did that in Andor as well, too. When have both of you seen Andor?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So when Bix Kayleen, when she's being interrogated and essentially tortured, they play audio through headphones of creatures or inhabitants of another planet dying, and their sounds drove Imperial officers that were there crazy. So they took that recording and they played it back and used it as a torture device. And we never actually get to hear the sounds. We are in that moment. There's total silence, and we get to just see her reaction. And I think that's more terrifying than anything that they could have played. So it's something similar.
Right.
That's perfect because it's the Star Wars example.
Yes.
We're a Star Wars podcast. Enough about
But
Jaws and Fight Club.
I think so last year somebody said something really interesting. They said instead of doing Book of Boba Fett and inserting 2 episodes of The Mandalorian into it, they should have done the reverse and essentially inserted 2 episodes of a Boba Fett story into The Mandalorian, which would have kept him still more of a mystery. And I think it would have been tighter that way. And I think that the legend of Boba Fett would have just blown up at that point. It would have been really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there again, I think what ended up happening is they needed some kind of way to fix
Right.
Mandalorian season 2. So that was just an easy way to bridge a gap. And that way we're not sitting there going, oh, it's been 2 years since we've seen Mandalorian season. Between Mandalorian seasons, we got the Book of Boba Fett, which subdued us enough,
Right. And likely on a smaller budget too.
Right.
Let me ask you this, David. You know what happens in the sequel trilogy, and you know what's kind of going on right now. In the trailer, they kind of insinuate that there's something bigger, something sinister happening in the galaxy. Do you have any gut instincts? Do you feel anything through the Force as to what that might be? Are they saying that there's something out there like the First Order?
I think we are going to see the development or the very early beginnings of the First Order. And I also think that they're intent upon explaining that line, somehow Palpatine returned. And I think we've seen bits and pieces of that in season 2 with and I think in the Bad Batch as well too, where they showed that the clones that they were trying to produce, I guess, clones of the Emperor or Snoke. So I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see more of that, the cloning facilities, as well as the very beginnings of the First Order.
Awesome. Yeah, there was a what was the book? Anyways, there was a book where like a bad guy comes from outside the Star Wars universe into it's Legends now. It's not part of canon. It's like Vogue or something like that. I never read the book, but I do know that there's a villain that comes from outside the Star Wars universe into it, and they don't use the Force and all that stuff. So I was like, are they trying to do something like that, fold in some of the old canon? But no, I agree with you. I think it's more of a first order thing.
Is there anything that you think we're going to see specifically about the First Order?
I do think the cloning is going to be the big thing that we'll see, because they kind of shown some of those Snoke things, Snoke tubes. So I think we're going to get some more cloning information. I think that's why they wanted Grogu, is to get his Force sensitive blood to try to clone the Emperor. But they were probably experimenting on someone else before they went into Palpatine's DNA to try to work on that. So I think we're going to get some more of that kind of stuff.
Could that be what we saw in Obi-Wan at the fortress when he sneaks into the fortress? We do see a number of Jedi, and it looks like they're encased in amber something. Could that be maybe what they used, as their original resources for whatever Jedi blood they needed?
Entirely possible.
Yeah.
Or as Obi-Wan would say, possibly.
And then they used Andy Serkis because he pissed them off so bad as a torture device to make Snoke.
Yeah, he led them, so they made an example out of him and turned him into the leader of their organization.
Yeah.
That prisoner, he's got leadership material. Let's promote him to the leader of the First Order.
Can't swim, but he's still good.
Yeah. Give him the Force. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Nothing bad.
It'd be funny if that actually did happen, where they were like, yeah, this guy's awesome. Let's use him. And it could be a throwaway line somewhere, and it just explains everything that we've been contemplating for years. And it's in a throwaway line in a movie somewhere.
Wouldn't put it past Star Wars at this point.
Yeah. Well, Andy did say that it's got nothing to do with Snoke, but is that like one of those from a certain point of view? The character I'm portraying has nothing to do with Snoke, but Snoke has everything to do with this character.
That'd be great.
We'll see. The reason I asked David on this podcast is he has this episode that was released this past week about the state of Star Wars collecting, and it got me thinking about the health of the Star Wars secondary market right now. There was also an article. There's a lot of Hasbro financial information coming out about their fourth quarter and how bad it was, but it did mention Magic the Gathering is like $1 billion industry for them now. But there's some cracks in that brand. The secondary market might not be so healthy because they're overproducing cards and stuff. So with that article and David's podcast talking about the state of Star Wars, it got me thinking about the state of the secondary market right now. How healthy is Star Wars? And so I went back to I pulled some prices in November of 2021, which is towards the end of COVID, and I compared those to prices today on eBay. There's a couple issues with that. As David had pointed out yesterday in our discussion, I'm actually comparing these prices to the end of COVID. So it does measure a decline, but it's not really measuring the health of the market. It's more measuring the decline of the market after COVID. What would be more apt and more helpful would be to compare the prices from a couple months ago to now, which I just don't have the data for. So I can't get into that, but I can get into the prices from, towards the tail end of COVID to today. It does, spoiler alert, measure a downward trend. So there is some decline there. So I'll get into that in just a minute. Not sure where Glenn went. It's gonna have to edit this.
Jason, what was the quote that you had gotten from that article about the secondary market and the primary market?
Yeah, the quote was that a healthy secondary market will lead to a healthy primary market. And I know it's not one-to-one with Star Wars collecting because, with Magic the Gathering, you buy your cards and then you go to the secondary market and you buy the cards that will help build up your pack and increase your game, better your game. With Star Wars, it's just not the case. But it does kind of measure the interest of collectors. So if there's less demand for these figures, then you are going to see a softening on the dollar value on the secondary market, which could in turn mean possibly that there is a softening demand on the first market, primary market. And I think there's evidence of that when we go into Target now. There's that wave of, the figure in Dan, Leia in her Endor dress. Those are just hanging out. And all the Targets that I visit, there's the Boba Fett 40th anniversary Black Series figure. That's prototype Luke Skywalker figure. That's just hanging out, which those have never just hung out. Everyone's grabbing those. So there are some clues that maybe the first primary market is not as healthy as it used to be. And so measuring these numbers might help illuminate the secondary market's health.
Well, to back up your point about the secondary market, I think that's really what's affecting the primary market. I think there was a time over the last maybe 2 or 3 years where figures were getting snatched up because there was a very high resale value for them. Resellers knew that they could make money on them, and they were scooping them up before they would even, really land on store shelves. And I think that market has fallen away. Whether it's that collectors are less interested in collecting them all, like as you said yesterday, we've been trained to do, or it's just there isn't that long-term value there because maybe I've seen this with Topps doing their Star Wars card trader app, and I've seen this with Hasbro with their figures. Anytime that Hasbro releases for the vintage collection a reissue, they really don't change much to it. So it looks very similar to the original. And I think that kills the secondary collector's market. There's no difference. And I think collectors have grown a little weary of that. And as a result, Hasbro has kind of killed that secondary market for value. The idea where if you purchase something these figures are so worthwhile, and they're so interesting, and they're so connective, that those values they'll retain their values, or they'll actually increase in value. And as long as you have that, you have a great interest in collectibles. When you take that away, when you bottom that out, like what's happening now, that secondary market, that lack of a secondary market, affects the primary one.
Yeah. I think the vintage collection is not a good investment right now, unless you're just buying for the long term. Because if they do close down the vintage collection, then there's not going to be the reprints anymore, the reissues. And at that point, it's going to be a worthwhile investment, because then there's no entity crashing the market by issuing something over and over again. I think the only example that's weird is the Anakin Black series. That was starting to increase in value, and then they reissued it with the archive, and now the archive is actually worth more than the original Black series run. And that might be because of the updated face sculpting, but that's selling close to $200 right now on eBay, which is crazy.
I think that could also be from the fact that maybe they weren't as available, where people, maybe they weren't as produced as some of the other ones. But you're right. I mean, that one, that's an anomaly. But for these other ones, I mean, do you feel the same way though about the Black series that you do, the vintage collection? Do you see that there's still an interest in it, and it's worth buying, or not?
For me, no, just because there's so many reissues. Plus, I'm not an opener. And so buying a box with figures in it, it just doesn't make sense to me anymore. Before, I'd be able to look at the figure, put it on the shelf, even though it's in the box, there's a window to see it. If it's behind a box now, if it's behind a plastic, if it's behind cardboard, I can't see it. It's not worth it. So if I'm not going to open it, I'm not going to buy it. It's just not, I don't see a point in it.
When I did my episode, there was an article from Yahoo Finance where they had spoken to the editor at Toy Book Magazine, which the great magazine covers, all sorts of toys globally. And one of the things that the editor said, was that the fact that Hasbro has gone to essentially non-plastic packaging and not displaying the figures that are in these boxes have turned off a lot of adult collectors, which makes up, as you and Glenn really noted in one of your recent episodes, the kidults, the adult collectors but the adult collectors that buy these things, they're turning their core base off as a result.
Yeah, I mean, it is, we do need to be environmentally conscious now, but at what cost? I mean, you're just cutting. And the other thing about all these articles that are coming about Hasbro, they're focusing on Dungeons and Dragons, Wizards of the Coast, Peppa Pig, G.I. Joe, Transformers. There's no mention about Marvel or Star Wars. So I kind of get the feeling like that's not even a factor in the financial health of that company. This is just something they do to help with the bottom line, but they're not dependent on it.
So you think Star Wars is not as big of a deal to Hasbro as we think it is?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a passionate fan base. I don't think.
No, I'm sorry. It could be the same thing. Like, we're pains in their butt, and Lucasfilm or Disney's a pain in their butt to deal with. So they may just be like washing their hands of it and giving, a half-ass effort on it.
Yeah, they recently got rid of, or they lost the license for the Disney princesses to Mattel. So who knows what that means? That's just a fact. I can't read into it, but that did happen.
Right.
The licensing costs for Marvel and for Star Wars, again, both Disney properties, could be very expensive as well, where their margins or their profit
to that budget. That's why they reuse molds, in my estimation. I don't have any access to their financials, and I don't know what their budget is, but I would imagine that's why we get so many Boba Fett's, is because people love Boba Fett, it sells, and we have the mold. Let's go.
Yeah.
But looking at the vintage collection here, let me go through some of these numbers. VCO1 Dengar, the one that kicked it off, late November 2021, it was $150. It's gone down to $100. I don't think that one has seen a re-release, not like Boba Fett VC09, which in November was $20, and I think that's around the time they re-released it. He's up to $58 now on eBay. Darth Sidious, which was kind of interesting, VC12 was $150. Now it's 75. Anakin, VC13, which originally was Darth Vader, and then they changed it to Anakin late in production. That went from $100 to 115. But if you have the Darth Vader version, that's all the way up to like $170. So it depends on which version. I think Darth Vader was the mistake, and Anakin was the thing that they changed it to. So like Darth Vader's the earlier version of that figure.
Right, because it's Anakin from Revenge of the Sith, essentially, when
Yes.
he's fighting Obi-Wan at the end.
Yeah. But he's also known as Darth Vader then. So I thought that was a creative way for them to do both, but it turns out from the Vintage Collection Archive Edition book, it was a mistake. But VC16 Obi-Wan, I think that one got a re-release. Is that the one? Went from $150 to 72. General Grievous went from 130 to 13. The Magna Guard went from 75 to 81, so there was a slight increase there. Clone Commander Cody went from $180 to $156, which is weird because he hasn't seen a re-release yet. They haven't announced one. But I do know that if you have that one unpunched, that one goes for thousands of dollars.
Wow.
That one's
Did you
crazy.
say the Grievous went from $130 to $13?
$113, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
If I said 13, I meant 113.
I was like, that was
Did
quite
I
a
say 13?
decline.
Oh God, thank you for clarifying.
No, sure. I mean, 90% drop. That's
Yeah.
wow.
Yoda went from 65 to 55, although he just got a new figure. I can't remember if it was a straight re-release or if it's just a new figure. Kit Fisto went from 125 to 105. Zam Wessel $50 to $66, so there was some increase there. Mace Windu, which had a re-release, went from $70 to $44. So you can see how if you have an investment, you buy these figures and then Hasbro re-releases them, there is a sharp decline in those, like you were saying, David. Let's see, Clone Commander Gree went from $145 to $122. Arc Trooper Commander went from $175 to $113. Ayla Secura went from $100 to $70, and that's interesting because she hasn't had a re-release, so that's just a straight decline. The 501st Trooper went from $160 to $94. Hasbro recently re-released that, but on a Clone Wars card back, so it was a different card back, but it is a re-release of that kind of same figure, so there's a decrease there. The prototype Boba Fett went from $100 to $88. Slave Leia or Hutt Slayer Leia, whichever you want to go with, went from $200 to $222.
Well, you know they're never going to re-release her.
Well, they say that, but if there's a regime change and it's new blood who might have a more affinity for what was, they might do that. They might say, let's just remove that. I don't know if it's going to happen. I think it wouldn't say Slave Leia because they're owned by Disney. I think it would say more something like Hutt Slayer Leia. I think they would move with that. But yeah. Salacious Crumb went from $500 towards the end of the year of 2021 to $750 today.
You just had to add him in, didn't you?
Well, interestingly, the mouse droid, which is the companion piece, went from $750 to $525. So there was a decrease there. But like David was saying yesterday in our conversation, this is something that's important to bring up. This doesn't measure volume. So if there's only one Salacious Crumb available right now, that's going to influence this chart. Whereas if there's 100 different Salacious Crumbs out, might bring down the price a little bit. So this doesn't take into account the volume of items, the volume of these figures for sale right now. That makes sense.
No, that makes total sense. Because yeah, he's right. You've got one, and it's going to be worth triple what 5 of them would be worth.
Right.
And
the
the
Rebels.
I'm sorry.
Go, man.
The last 2 years have really been an anomaly when you look at them, because it's, I think if you were to and maybe Glenn and Jason, you can speak on the vintage collection better than I can, but if you were to trace the rise or fall in prices for the different figures starting from 2010 for the vintage collection, I think it's pretty steady. Maybe some will burst up like like the Slave or a Hutslayer Leia, but I think for the most part it is a gradual increase, like we've seen even in vintage Kenner collecting. With this, the market for all collectibles shot up, so that brought everything up. And then I think as vintage Kenner stuff became very expensive, especially around 2021 and 2022, people started to look at things that were Kenner adjacent, and vintage collection was one of them. It was a line that halted, so I think for a lot of people there was a genuine love there, and then we saw prices shoot up. So I think if we were to even chart it back from 2019 to now, I think we would see almost this huge V where it overshot and then came down. But for a lot of it, it's still at that point, maybe 2022 was still higher, and now we're starting to see a decline as people are generally buying less overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. There's probably some sort of V where prices shot up and then they're coming back down now. Does that mean that it's doing that for Hasbro itself? I don't know, but I would assume yes, based on what I see on toy shelves. But who's to say? Finishing this up real quick for the vintage collection, the Republic Trooper was $100. He's now $31, but he just had a recent re-release. He was higher at one point. He was more than $100 at one point, but in late November 2021, that's what he tracked him at. Darth Vader, Return of the Jedi, which is the last figure they made in the original run, was $175. He's tracking $160. But going into the more modern era, you've got the Imperial Assault Tank Commander for $90 back then. It's $115 today. The Death Star Gunner was $54. He's $44 today. It's the Rogue One array was $65. She's $70 now, which is kind of surprising. For some reason, that one's sticking out as one to grab. The Sith Trooper Armory Pack was $35. That was an Amazon exclusive. Now it's $33. Cara Dune, which was $33. She's $27 today. Darth Vader for Rogue One. I think these had just come out at the time, which is interesting because Darth Vader from Rogue One was $17. He's $16 today. The Armorer for Mandalorian was $12. She's still $12 today. Moff Gideon was $15. He's $14 today. Mandalorian in the full Beskar armor was $15. He's $12 today. And then Clone Captain Rex was $20, and now they're $22 today.
I want to bring up an interesting point or an interesting topic or whatever, but the reason why they started re-releasing all these things in the Black Series and the TVC was to compete with scalpers, or to compete to bring, you had the Ahsoka that was, about to hit $1,000, and then they re-released her to bring that price down. Do you think that they ended up shooting themselves in the foot doing that? Because it feels like that they had a lot of resentment towards everybody who were buying stuff for investment. Now they're going to start re-releasing things, and so people stopped buying stuff because they're just going to re-release it in 10 years and I'm out of money.
Yeah. Hasbro's role is to make money first and foremost, right? There are people who make these toys, who work on them, like someone like Chris Reif, who does a fantastic job and puts his whole heart, soul into it. But Hasbro is there to make money. In Ahsoka, your VC-102 was reaching upwards of $1,500 during the pandemic, and that people were basically selling them for that type of price. They saw that there was this desire for them, and that's the reason they looked at it and said, there's this huge pool of collectors that want this thing, that maybe they can't afford it, but we can basically just put it out. It costs us nothing, because we've already done the tooling. We'll do a few changes. I think where they shot themselves in the feet and maybe really damaged the collector's market is there's one change that they had to do, which they didn't. And if I was working there, I would have fought for this. All they had to do is change the image on the card back.
Mhm.
It's the cheapest change. You don't have to, do anything to the figure. The photo that they used of Ahsoka was, kind of an old artistic interpretation. They could have put something new, and what that would have done is that would have kept the interest in the original VC 102 to its highest levels. It would have made collectors who already own that one go out and buy this new, different version because it was a different card back. And I think it would have kept the collectibles market much more intact. Instead, they basically obliterated it. They flooded the market with essentially ones that look exactly the same, but with maybe slight paint differences and 2020 on the back or 2021 on the back instead of 2012. So I think the re-releases are maybe financially good for Hasbro in the short term, but the long term it kills the secondary market, which, Jason, as you said, that really affects the primary market in the long term.
Yeah. So I kind of echo what you're saying. Absolutely, they could have done that. And back when they originally released that figure, they had rules that they had to follow for the vintage collection that they established for themselves. And one of them was that we were going to use realistic versions of the characters, which is why they didn't use a Clone Wars animated version of Ahsoka on that card back, the Obi-Wan and the Anakin from the Clone Wars. They photoshopped Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen on someone else's body for that card back. But then today, they're using Tartakovsky's Clone Wars animated cell images on the card back, which goes against that original rule. So they could have re-released today, because they're not following the rule, a version of that figure with the animated look of Ahsoka on that card back, which I think also contributes to some of the missteps that they're taking with the vintage collection, because there was rules that fans were very well aware of, and they're kind of breaking those.
And I think stretching beyond the rules and including something like the Tartakovsky animated images is interesting, and it will help, to appeal to a larger fan base at the time. But you're right. There are certain guidelines that they created that they should stick to, and then there are ones where maybe they can bend a little bit. But I mean, they could have included a Starfield background for an Ahsoka figure, and it would have sold just as much, if not more.
Yeah, they've shot themselves in the foot, I guess, because it is decreasing the value. And if you're an investor and you've bought these figures, and if you bought the figures for $600 and then suddenly you're seeing they're being sold for $300, you're like, forget this, I'm out, because it's a bad investment. And then you're just losing more of that audience. They're not going to buy product because they're afraid that they're going to lose more money.
Right.
And as I've kind of discovered with the Black series, some of this stuff is selling below retail. The numbers that I picked are the higher number ones, but the ones in between all of these, like, you can get them for 16, 18, $20, which is below retail. So in theory, you could skip ordering it off of Hasbro Pulse and then go on eBay a couple months later and buy it less than retail. So why bother buying it at Target if I can get it at a cheaper price? I know you got to factor in shipping, but still, if shipping is only a couple bucks, still you're buying it less on the secondary market than the first primary market.
That's an awesome point. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. Or you can even buy them at toy shows. We see now, there are so many tables that are just flooded with these newer vintage collection pieces. I thought the Clone Wars version of Ahsoka, the season 7 one, was going to be really difficult to get. And it's at every show I see, and the price just keeps, or every show that I attend, sorry, and the price just keeps going down and down for it. So.
Yeah, we were talking to somebody we have a Powder Springs toy show that happens every other month here in town. And we were talking to Matt, who had a booth a couple times, and he's brought a lot of stuff. And he says the thing that people only care about are the open Marvel Legends. So they don't care about the boxed items. And when you go to these when I go to the Powder Springs toy show, they're asking for above retail for the boxes, and you see the same boxes show after show after show. So you can just kind of sense that they're not selling, nobody wants them. They're just looking for the cheaper figures. And so this stuff just it just sits in boxes for a couple months, it comes back out, and then it goes back into a box. It's kind of an interesting observation, I guess. Confirmation bias, maybe, but I don't know. Cutting into the Black Series real quick. Like I said before, Anakin is the weird one. Number 12, which was in the orange box line, that was $77. It's today selling for $108. But back then, Anakin was in the archive for $90. Like the second it fell away from the toy shelves, it started shooting up in the value market, that archive edition. And I think it might sell a little bit more. It might be a little bit more attractive because it's got that face printing technology. So it looks, the likeness is a lot better in that archive version than the original version. Today, that archive version is $170. It's actually selling more than the Mandalorian first edition figure.
Wow.
Which is kind of crazy. Darth Maul was $30. He's now $38. The Emperor from the blue line, the blue version of the Black Series, was $52. He's now $36. Clone Commander Cody was $62. He's now $48. Hutt Slayer Leia was $72. She's now $68. I would expect that one to keep going because it kind of goes with what we're saying. They're not reissuing that one, so the only way you can get it is to buy that version. So it's interesting to me that the price has decreased on that, which is a really good example that the demand is just not there for Black Series right now.
It's a perfect example. Yeah.
Qui-Gon Jinn was 48. He's actually 55 now. He's increased. Clone Captain Rex, like they keep reissuing it. The price goes down. At the time it was 80. Now it's 93. I remember at one point he was 125. So that's one that's in high demand. Dengar was 55. He's now $21, which is about retail. Dr. Aphra was 89. She's 81 now. BT1 was 40, 47. 000 was 78. It's 77 now. The Mandalorian first edition was 132 when we tracked it. Glenn and I have seen that at toy shows for 150. On eBay, you can get it for 118 right now.
Wow.
I've seen them as low as $100, which was shocking.
Yeah. Yeah. Because then, yeah, that was a frustrating one to try to track down. Just like these Micro Galaxy things, it's always, every store I'd go into, they would have everything but that one. And it just felt like I was always a bridesmaid, never a bride with that figure. Second sister Inquisitor was 37. She's 50 now, which is interesting. And I don't know if that's because the video game thing, like are video game fans just really into these figures? Cara Dune was $83. She's now 70. And then quickly going into some of the exclusives, if my computer will respond. The Biker Scout with the speeder bike was $61. It's 67 now. Han Solo with the Tauntaun was $98. Is 95 now. Luke Skywalker with the Wampa was $85. It's 82 now. The Snow Speeder was 117, and that's around the time that it dropped for 120. That was retail. It's 162 now. The TIE Fighter, interestingly, was 153. It's 142 now. And then the Sand Trooper and Dewback, $100. Now it's 84. Now, go into what David said, that it's really measuring post-COVID to now. I went back and I tried to find some vintage collection figures that were released a couple months ago. So this is against retail. Miggs Mayfield for the vintage collection is selling for $14. He was originally $14 at retail. Casca Reeves was $14. She's now selling for $13. The Stormtrooper in the Star Wars packaging was $13. She's now selling for $21. The Imperial Gunner was $13 for $17. Bespin Security Guard was $13. She's still $13. R2D2 with the sensor scope was $13. Interestingly, it's $28 right now. The ARC Trooper from Battlefront 2 was 16. He's now 19. ARC Trooper Lambent Seeker, I think that's the black one with the orange markings. He's still $15 both times. The Bespin security guard, the other version, was $13. He's now 20. The 501st Clone Trooper, which we were just talking about, was selling for $16. He's now 18. Darth Vader, the Dark Times, which is the version from Obi-Wan from earlier this summer, was $14. He's still 14. Reva, which you can still find on store shelves, was selling for $15. She's now 13. Or, excuse me, $11. I was looking at Anakin Padawan version. He was 15 and now he's 14. So there's a little decrease there. Obi-Wan Kenobi from Obi-Wan Kenobi, that show. Remember that show? That was a good show. Remember Ewan McGregor? He's so handsome.
Hello there. You remember that time that you tried to say hi to?
And he gave me the peace sign.
Yeah,
he was driving
was
by and he looked at me. We had a one-on-one moment, and in that moment, we just said we love each other. Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Wandering Jedi, was $15. He's selling for $10 now, which is, I guess, it's not surprising because you could walk into Walmart and find that one. So there's not a demand for it right now. The clone Mandalorian Super Commando Captain, which I think is the Darth Maul looking one, was 14. He's still 14. So it's a lot of the same right now. Figure and Dan, $14. He's now 15. The Ahsoka Clone Trooper was $15. He's now 14. So it's kind of flat. A lot of declines. But that's my analysis of the secondary market. I did try to calculate an overall like percentage loss, and I don't trust my Excel skills, so I don't know if this is accurate, but it does look like there's a 25% decline from 2021 to today, but that just could be a measurement of interest post-COVID and not a true testament to the secondary market right now, but it is a decline, a softening.
Do you think that, I know you guys hit a lot of the stores around you looking for things like the Micro Galaxy. Do you think, though, that a lot of people over the past 2 years have been turned off to going to Target and to Walmart and all these other big box stores and not finding the figures and just giving up? I mean, I stopped looking probably 2 years ago because it wasn't worth it.
Yes.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Yes, because I'm at that point now. Because it takes up so much time, and it's so disheartening every time you walk into a store and you see the same stuff over and over again that you give up.
And we could talk about if it's healthy or not, but I do love my hobby. I truly do love it. And if you keep going to stores day after day and they don't have anything, or you feel like, well, they didn't have all this Micro Galaxy stuff yesterday, but it's there today. The chases are missing. It's a little heartbreaking. And after a while, it's another day of heartbreak. It's another day. Why do I do this? Because I'm just breaking my own heart. And it does get disheartening. And yeah, it does feel like, why am I doing this to myself? Maybe I should stop because it's not healthy.
Right.
Well, and the reason why a lot of times we go back to the toy aisles is because that's what we did as children.
Yeah.
And if we don't have that experience anymore, if it's not the same, and not that the shelves have to be flooded with toys for us to experience that, but if you keep going back, and I don't know about you, but near me, it was just you'd have all these Marvel figures and He-Man and G.I. Joe and everything, and then there was just this huge gap where there was nothing, maybe one figure hanging on a peg, and that was the Star Wars area.
Yeah, I went out with a couple friends last weekend and we hit 5 or 6 Targets and maybe 1 or 2 Walmarts. And they were finding stuff. They were finding Transformers, He-Man, Ninja Turtles. They picked up a couple of new Transformers. I couldn't find a single Star Wars thing, whether Black Series, Vintage Collection, or Micro Galaxy. There was nothing. And it was just very disheartening because they're like, oh, look at this, look at this. And I'm like, all right, let's go to the next one. There's nothing here.
And that's why I started collecting the new He-Man line, because I can find that stuff on shelves, and you got to scratch the itch.
Yeah. I do like the fact that I can pre-order and I'm guaranteed that stuff. I don't need to look for Black Series anymore. If they got into chases, that would just be even more frustrating because then I'm hunting down chases for Black Series, and at that point, that would have just been too much. That probably would have been the straw that break the camel's back, because as collectors, like we had talked yesterday, we have been trained for 40 years to collect them all. That's what it said on the back. Collect all 92. They number all the Black Series 1 through 114. Is that right? The vintage collection, they number the back. Yeah, I think they're up to 250 right now for the vintage collection. So it's like, if you're missing one, it does stick out, because you've got 1 through 13 and then you're missing 14. So they have trained us to collect them all. And when they've insert things to prevent us from collecting them all, like chases, it does frustrate us, because we're like Pavlov's dog. I can't get them all, so why bother?
That actually happened with the Star Trek line. I don't know how I know this. I can't remember where I heard this from, but
it's on the Toys That Made Us, David.
Is that it? Okay, yes.
Yes.
So, so the line was popular for a while, and then they came out with basically like a wave of figures where they were limited edition. The numbers were really low, and most collectors did not get them. And once they didn't get them, they stopped collecting Star Trek, and the line died. So yeah, I agree. Like the chase ones would be interesting for the vintage collection and for the Black Series, but I could see it also turning off collectors, where either, they would be in the hands of people who are reselling them and scalping them for crazy prices, and that would just, that would take away, I think, a lot of the fun of collecting. I like what you said. We've been trained to collect all 92 from the the Kenner era, but I think there was also a joy in collecting all 92. They weren't crazy prices. They were $2 or $3 for a figure. Yeah. And I think that's kind of been removed a little bit. Like, if you're going into a store and to buy 4 figures, you have to spend $100. I think that's, for new figures, I think that's a hard thing for people to swallow.
Yeah, and to that point, Kenner would reissue figures on, so if it's Empire Strikes Back, they would reissue the Star Wars stuff on the Empire Strikes Back logo. But it was on store shelves. So, like, if you were making $4 a week in your allowance, you would go the next week and that figure was probably there. You'd be able to buy it for $4. And then the next week, if you didn't have Han Solo from Star Wars and it's, 83, you could buy that Return of the Jedi version of the figure, because it's there. It's not gone from 1977. It was always present there. So that's right. Missing too. So it was easier to collect on 92, like you're saying, because it was there. It's not there now.
No. Have you noticed at all, for either of you, have you noticed a change in what the stores carry? Like, because I know near me now, I've started to see figures back on shelves, but I'm at the point where it's too little too late.
Yeah, for me, it's... Go ahead.
Well, I'm noticing that, but right now it's all the same figures. They'll have like a case of the Imperial officer from Andor. They have like a case of those for some reason. Or they'll have a bunch of the, the retro line or the Boba Fett, but every store has the same 5 figures and they have a bunch of them.
Mm-hmm.
And my worry is that as that continues, as we see these empty store shelves, Target will look at it and be like, well, we've got all these other figures here, so let's just move all the Star Wars stuff down into a smaller spot and just put more He-Man there, because we have stock for that. Why do we have blank space on the wall? Because that we could put something there to make money off of it. Mm-hmm. So over time, I have seen the Star Wars stuff shrink down. It's now the same size as the Marvel stuff. Actually, Marvel is actually bigger than Star Wars right now at my Target at Woodstock, right? Right, Glenn?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Which is another heartbreaking thing. I understand, because Marvel's was doing so well. I don't know if it's doing hot now, because people are saying they're getting tired of what's happening with Marvel post Endgame. So we'll see, but yeah, it's still the golden child. What's the phrase?
Goose.
Golden child?
Golden Goose.
Golden Goose.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that the wrestling figures are starting to take over more than the Star Wars figures, because it feels like there's like 4 or 5 pegs wide, top to bottom, full of wrestling figures right now.
Wrestling is big down here. As we asked Second Chance, he's like, wrestling is huge. I don't know if that's the whole country or if it's just the Southeast or what, but
it's the whole country.
Is it?
Mm-hmm. Do you remember? So when The Force Awakens was coming out, there was a big push on toys, Force Friday, and so a lot of the action figures pertaining to that film were released like a month or two in advance, maybe more.
Yeah.
And I think that acted as an advertisement or as a promotional device for Disney, and it benefited Hasbro in a way. People were seeing these figures and these characters that they didn't know yet, and they were snatching them up before the series of the film came out. I feel like a lot of that's missing now, where like Glenn, if you said you're seeing the Imperial Trooper from Andor show up on store shelves now, that's great, but they should have been there in September or even August, leading up to the release of the show.
Right. I think a lot of that is Disney trying to be secretive with Star Wars, because
Sure.
there's been leaks, in the past with with Ghostbusters. This is one that just popped into my head. When the new Ghostbusters movie came out, they released all the OG guys old in their uniforms, so it spoiled the movie a little bit. So I think Disney is just or Lucasfilm is just so secretive with Star Wars, and that's from the beginning in 1977. That's why we had to have the early bird kits. They're just so secretive with it that it hurts the bottom end. And like you said, yeah, it should have been in shelves. That's a figure that could have been in the shelves when Andor and when Obi-Wan, when those shows started. They could have been at top of mind, and people would have gone by them.
The original. Oh, sorry, Jason.
No, go.
The original early bird kit. That was the fault of essentially just nobody believing that this film or this franchise was going to blow up. But for something like the character of Yoda, they held off on that 30-second figure in 1980 until the movie was released, because Lucasfilm wanted it to be a surprise. But we still received 10 figures from the film before the film came out. And you're right though, Glenn, we're just not seeing that. And I think Lucasfilm has been very secretive with what it's put out. And I think they realized somewhere around the time of Obi-Wan that they can't do that. That's why we started to see Reva figures early and maybe even Obi-Wan. But I think they have to be a little more. I think there has to be a better balance where we're seeing figures, and then because we need that. I think we need that promotion, and we need to connect to a lot of collectors connect to the storylines through the toys, because that's what we did as children.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is also annoying when you see like a Marvel show will come out on Wednesday and Thursday they're announcing a figure, and we don't get that in Star Wars.
Yeah. And talking about Toys R Us, I don't want to take too much more of your time. It's your birthday. You should go hang out with family and stuff and have a good time. But jumping back real quick to Toys R Us, I do remember, because Force Awakens came out in December, and so September is when they had the Force Friday. My family and I were like one of the first in line because we got there a couple hours early. They had stormtroopers out. It felt like an event. It felt special. Mm-hmm. This was not a normal toy release. This was Star Wars toys. And I think there was some relationship, like Walmart had that. Walmart had a midnight release because Toys R Us was doing that. So Walmart wanted to compete with Toys R Us. I feel like now, well, there's a couple things, but right now, there's no need to do that, because Target and Walmart are like, no, we're not going to have employees at midnight. You're going to play our game. We're just going to put them out when we put them out. If it's 2:53 in the afternoon, that's when we're putting them out. It's what you got to do. So it doesn't feel special. It's not an event anymore. And I do remember that Force Friday going. The manager came out and he saw the long line went stretched all the way across the front of Toys R Us, arched around the back, and the manager came out. I was like, oh wow, there's a lot of people here. Yeah. And we were like, are you gonna have enough toys? He's like, yeah, we got plenty of toys in there. We walk in and it was about maybe 8 feet wide by 4 feet tall of space, and there was a small section, maybe about 3 feet wide and 4 feet tall of action figures, and that was it. There was not other people, and there were some people who came in, saw that there was a crowd around the action figures. There was no way they're going to get it, and they just left for Walmart. So there was some issues then that distribution or the manufacturing was less than Revenge of the Sith, which was an entire aisle of Target toys or Target space. You just don't get that anymore. It's not there. So I do feel like part of the decline in the hobby is the manufacturer not making it an event anymore. Post-pandemic, you can't turn 3 stations on the TV without hearing something about the economy, which does play an important part, because if you have $20 in your wallet and you need to debate between gas and an action figure, first of all, if you have to ask that question, you're going to buy gas. You're not going to buy the action figure. That's going to dictate what you do. Secondly, the reissues, like we've been saying, have decreased the value in the market. People are just not going to buy it anymore. I think there's a lack of creativity. I personally don't care about it, but if you turn it on Bosk's Bounty, which is a YouTube channel, and one of his things is the Adalny version of that's
Aldani.
the Adani. That version of the vintage collection figure uses Shore Trooper feet, whereas the Black Series is fully new sculpted, and it's screen accurate, whereas the vintage collection is not. And that does matter. It doesn't matter to me, but it does matter to some collectors. So I think it's just a perfect storm of all this stuff coming together and really turning people off. And I think the secondary market is softening. I think this is the proof and the evidence that I've been looking for the past couple of weeks. And I think if there's some positive to come from this, maybe this is the low point and we can only go up from here.
I hope so, man. I hope so.
Any last thoughts?
If and this is a question for both of you, if you were working at Hasbro, or if you had the ability to change what Hasbro's doing, what are like 2 or 3 things that you would do right off the bat to get the collecting focus back, to get Star Wars back to where it's been?
The first thing I would do is re-release VC66 Salacious Crown for everyone. I think the first thing I would do is try to match and sync up with the new media. So Mandalorian's coming out. I would have a wave of Mandalorian figures, brand new, sculpted. I would try to find there's no aliens or droids that they're making. The one droid that they made for Andor was a special one. It was that convention exclusive. So I would throw more droids in there. I would just try to increase the diversity of character selection, because it is Mando Boba, Mando Boba, Mando Boba over and over again. And so I think I would get rid of that pattern. I would stop with the repacks and the reissues. You know, if you want to save money, keep the gaming greats, because there is an audience for that seems to be doing really well. So maybe keep that, but outside of the gaming greats, everything else would be either new or some sort of advanced creative reuse in some way where people are excited by the reuse.
Yeah, no, I
Smart
have
tactic.
Yeah, I have to echo Jason as far as, the repacks and repaints. I mean, I love Boba Fett, but enough's enough with Boba Fett. They don't need to keep re-releasing him. I would, also have stuff ready when the show comes out, because that's when people want to buy stuff. I mean, I can say, when Cobb Vanth, when that guy was on screen, I'd have ran out right then and bought the figure, a $45 figure, and not thought twice. But because it was pre-order, it had a chance to cool, and my credit card, I changed my credit card, and then I lost the pre-order and I didn't care anymore. And I would also take a book out of like Marvel's, what the stuff they're doing with Marvel, the tracksuit mafia that they had in Hawkeye. They're releasing that figure with 3 heads. They're releasing that figure as an army builder. So we could do that in Star Wars, I think, really easy with the Jedi. You could do that with the Imperial officer. There's a lot of things that use the same body that you could release with 2 or 3 different heads. And I think people would army build that a lot easier than releasing 3 different figures. That's something I'd look into too. And yeah, stop the repack, stop the reissues.
And if you're going to offer repacks, I mean, you can maybe lower the cost a bit for collectors, which would just, would be Hasbro's way of saying we acknowledge that we're reissuing figures, we're kind of repacking them, and we want you to army build, but we understand that this is not an all new sculpt.
Right. Or do what they're doing. I mean, they've got a good idea with the 5-packs in the white boxes, but I think people were griping that they're still charging the same price for those figures. I don't know what they're charging versus, I don't know what they're charging, like $45-50 for 5 figures.
Yeah. That increased too, because it used to be $40. You were essentially getting $10 a figure, and that's increased to like 45, 50, 54, $55, something like that.
See, that's
Wow.
that's ridiculous, because you're saving, in my mind, and I think everybody else's mind, you're saving on packaging. You're putting things in one box. You're having to ship one thing versus 5 different things. There needs to be more of a cost savings there, I think, when they do the figure packs like that. There's a market there, but you've got to market it right. And if they're going to charge what 5 loose ones are going to go for, why would somebody buy a 5-pack?
So this is our show. You're asking us questions. Let's turn this around real quick. Last question for you. What would you do if you were running Hasbro?
I apologize. I'm used
No,
to
man,
I'm just teasing. It's great conversation. I really enjoyed this.
Yes.
If I were going to do something, I think I would acknowledge that the base buying the toys are adults. I would cater more toward them. And I think or at least vocally acknowledge them as the base. I would not do direct reissues. I would find a creative way to reissue a figure. So again, if you wanted something like the VC 102 Ahsoka, it would look markedly different from the front and back. The cards would be different. I think that's also why maybe the Anakin is so popular for the Black Series, because I think the art is different as well too, and the style. And I think if Lucasfilm is going to be secretive about their content, I fully understand that, and I would work with Lucasfilm more to say, okay, we understand we're not going to show Grogu, or we know you can't show us the material because you don't want certain things to leak out, but give us characters that we can release. Give us a wave of 5 to 10 characters that we can put out in April if a show is coming out in May, and build up stuff. Let's get back to event. I think the problem also lies with Lucasfilm too.
Yeah.
Lucasfilm right now, yes, maybe they have a slate of movies, as you mentioned, over the next 5 years, but they haven't communicated that with their fan base. We don't know what's going on, and all we're hearing about is that it's a Taika Waititi film or a Damon Lindelof film, when we really need to be knowing that it's a Knights of the Old Republic film, or whatever it is, because that's what they should care about, not the director of the moment.
Right.
But so I would start out with that. I think I would find ways to make the price points cheaper, because I think if you can lower the prices, people will buy more and more of the figures. They might wind up spending the same money, but they'll just buy more pieces rather than I have $25 to spend, I'm going to buy one and bring it home. And I think they have to be more conscious of what the influx of repacks and repaints does to a collector, where it just not having items on the shelves, they've taken a good step with the limiting the pre-orders. I think that's a big start, but I think not having product available, having product available way down the road, I think all of that is kind of a messy message right now. So I would clear all that up. And then, of course, Glenn, I would release the Ghost as a HasLab project with Hera, Chopper, Sabine, and throw in Ahsoka as well too.
Yep.
Hondo, I mean, let's go full force, and then you can use that as the bridge for the Ahsoka series if we're going to see the Ghost in there, and you can have new figures that you'd release in that wave like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me ask you. This just popped into my head, and then we'll go. What do you feel if they would do like a 50? If they would just say, forget the $25 price point. Let's just break the mold and go like a $40 to $50 price point, but we get a figure that has alternate heads, alternate hands, a lot of weapons. They do more of a deluxe figure.
You're talking Black Series, right?
Yeah, Black Series.
Yeah.
Or do the same thing with TVC. Do a $25 figure, but you're getting a lot more figure for your money, instead of trying to fight that $25 and $15. Go ahead. I'm hold on.
Yeah. Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Did you freeze?
He's frozen.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
I'm back.
He's back.
I'm back.
Okay. I think you could look back at the success of the McFarlane toys from even 20 years ago, where they were really the first ones to step out of the consistent mold of, figures in sort of that $5 to $10 range, and they created more expensive figures, but with really kind of high quality ones that looked more like little pieces of art rather than figures. And I think they did very well. So Glenn, I think that's a really interesting road that they could go down, and maybe it's the sort of a Black Series Premium or Black Series Deluxe type of line. But I think one of the things that we're missing, I think part of us want these really well developed and deluxe figures, realistic looking ones, but I think that the kid in us go back to the figures that we saw at stores for $2, where we could scoop up maybe 3 of them, at a time, even again back in the 80s and 90s. But I think there's something important about that, rather than having these that are comparable to like Hot Toys, right? Are we going toward that level, or are we looking and saying, we finally got the Ghost for HasLab, I want to add all of the figures.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, if you're not listening to it, David Quinn's podcast is one of the best Star Wars podcasts, if not the best Star Wars podcast out there. There's lots of care and consideration that goes into it. I'm always excited when I see that there's a new episode, because I'm like, ooh, there's a new David Quinn, because I know there's quality. I know there's care and consideration that's been put into each episode. It's not a regular weekly episode like us, which is why we don't have the quality that you have, because you take your time. If it takes you 2-3 weeks, you do that just to make sure that it's up to quality. So if you're not listening to it, listen to Prototypes in Production, because it is the greatest. The GOAT.
I appreciate the kind words. I love you guys so much. And I love that we are kind of in this, circle of podcasters who have kind of taken that mantle, and we're running with it. And we're doing things in all different ways and getting people connected. And I think, sometimes kind of we're doing what sometimes Lucasfilm and Hasbro should be doing and maybe aren't, and but also, I mean, you can see even from the great work that you guys do on a weekly basis, like you bring people together, you give people a position to care about collecting, the community. And I think it's so special. And I know one day when we're all, old and living in the same community together and,
Same
and
retirement
sitting
Star Wars
on
community.
Exactly. We're going to be looking back on these moments and just and thrilled to have had them and to been able to go through them together. So it's a blessing. I want to thank you guys for having me on today too, because I was looking forward to just hanging out with both of you, and I love your podcast dearly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks
We
for coming on,
appreciate
and
that.
thanks for the kind words.
Thank you for listening to the Smugglers Galaxy podcast. If you could, please leave a like and a 5-star review of the show anywhere you listen to podcasts. If it's allowed, it really helps us out and points people to the show. Follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Send us an email or message us. We love feedback. We love to make you part of our show. Our email address is smugglersgalaxy@gmail.com. Thank you to Alfonso Riviera for the Smugglers Galaxy logo. You can find him at the Rock the Force podcast. And thank you to Levi Waterhouse for the music. Hasbro re-release VC66, hashtag vote with your wallet. Pass on what you've learned. Be a positive force in the collecting community. This is the way.
This is the way.
It's the way.
Yes.